It was a bright afternoon in the middle of the city. The streets were busy with people carrying shopping bags, and the sound of cars and chatter filled the air. In the middle of all the noise stood a tall building with shiny glass walls. On the first floor was one of the city's most famous luxury stores, a place where the wealthy came to buy expensive clothes, watches, and jewelry. The store sparkled with golden lights, and through the glass you could see displays of handbags and suits that looked like they cost a fortune. A man walked up to the entrance quietly. He was dressed neatly, plain black trousers, a white shirt, and a dark jacket. He didn't look like someone trying to show off. He just carried himself with calm confidence. His name was David. He looked around once before walking in, holding the door open politely for a woman coming out with shopping bags. She smiled at him, but when he stepped inside, the smile on the staff's faces disappeared. Inside, the store smelled of perfume and new leather. Soft music played in the background. A few customers were trying on watches while others browsed the new arrivals. The workers were wearing perfectly pressed uniforms and moved around with rehearsed politeness. But when their eyes landed on David, their expression changed. They didn't greet him like they did the others. One of the salesmen looked at him from head to toe, then quickly turned away. David didn't say anything. He had seen this kind of reaction before. He walked toward the men's section where watches were displayed in glass cases. Each one had a small golden tag with its price. Most cost more than what many people earned in a year. David admired the craftsmanship and asked in a calm voice, "Excuse me, could I take a look at that one?" The salesman he spoke to hesitated. "That model is quite expensive," he said slowly. "Maybe you'd like to look at something more affordable." David smiled slightly. "That's all right. I just wanted to see the details up close." The man gave him a tight smile but didn't move. Instead, he said, "Maybe I should call the manager." Before David could reply, the salesman walked off. A few seconds later, a woman in her 50s appeared from behind the counter. She had short blonde hair, sharp glasses, and an expression that carried both authority and suspicion. Her name was Linda. She looked at David as if she was trying to figure out what he was doing there. "Yes, can I help you?" she asked, her tone more of a challenge than a question. David turned to her politely. "I just wanted to see one of your watches up close," he said, pointing at the one he liked. "The design caught my attention." Linda folded her arms. "That model costs over $15,000, she said coldly. "It's not for display handling. Only serious buyers can view it." David was quiet for a moment. He knew what she meant. She didn't think he could afford it. Still, he kept his voice calm. "I understand," he said softly. "But how would I decide if I want to buy it if I can't see it properly?" A few other customers began to notice the exchange. Some pretended not to look, but others clearly watched with interest. Linda's voice grew louder. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave if you're not planning to make a purchase. We have valuable items here and I don't want any problems." David blinked in disbelief. "I'm not causing any problem," he replied. "I only asked to look at a watch." Linda took a step closer, her voice sharp. "You people always come in here to look around, touch things, and waste time. This is a high-end store, not a place to browse." The sentence stung, but David didn't react. He could feel the eyes of everyone in the room on him. The music seemed to fade, and all he could hear was his own steady breathing. He felt embarrassed, but also sad. Sad that such things still happened in a place like this. He looked at Linda for a long second and said quietly, "You're making a mistake." Linda raised an eyebrow. "The only mistake would be letting you stay here any longer," she said. Then she waved at a young security guard standing near the door. "Please escort this man out." The guard hesitated. He didn't look comfortable with the situation, but he did as he was told. "Sir," he said gently, "maybe it's best if you step outside." David nodded slowly. He didn't argue, didn't raise his voice, didn't show anger. He simply straightened his jacket and walked toward the door. As he passed Linda, he said in a calm voice, "I hope you treat your next customer better than this." When he stepped outside, the cold air hit his face. He walked a few steps away from the store and stopped near a coffee shop window. He took a deep breath, trying to let go of the anger rising inside him. But it wasn't easy. The humiliation burned quietly, not because of the words themselves, but because of how small they tried to make him feel. People passed by, unaware of what had just happened inside the shiny glass doors. David looked back once at the store. He could see Linda inside talking to her staff with a smug expression, as if she had done something right. She probably believed she had protected her luxury brand image. She didn't know who he really was. David reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. His thumb hovered over the contact list for a moment before he pressed a number labeled Head Office. It rang once before a calm voice answered, "This is Corporate Relations. How can I help you?" "Hi," David said in his quiet voice. "It's David speaking. I completed my visit to the downtown store." "Oh," the voice on the other end said, sounding suddenly attentive. "That was the location we had concerns about, correct?" "Yes," David replied. And those concerns were valid. He didn't go into details yet. He just said, "You'll have my full report by the end of the day. But let's just say, I understand now why customers have been complaining." The voice on the other end sighed. "I see. Thank you, David. We'll be expecting your report." After hanging up, David walked into the small cafe next door and ordered a cup of coffee. He sat by the window facing the luxury store. From his seat, he could see Linda laughing with a wealthy-looking customer. She was all smiles now, her tone friendly and charming. The difference was painful to watch. He couldn't help thinking how differently she had acted with him just moments ago. David opened his laptop and began typing notes. He wrote down everything. The time he entered, the people he spoke to, their names, the exact words said, even how the other customers reacted. His fingers moved fast but steady. Every detail mattered. As he wrote, he thought back to why he had taken this job in the first place. He wasn't just some random inspector. He had worked in the retail industry for years, starting from the bottom. He had seen how often people judged others by skin color, clothes, or assumptions. Now, as an undercover compliance officer, his role was to make sure every customer, no matter who they were, was treated with respect. What happened in that store wasn't new. But each time it happened, it reminded him why his work mattered. He finished his coffee, saved his notes, and looked at the store one last time. The reflection of the streetlights made it look even more polished. But he knew the truth hiding behind the gold and glass, a truth that would soon be exposed. As he packed up his things, a young man sitting at the next table leaned over and said quietly, "I saw what happened in there." That woman was out of line. David looked at him surprised. The man continued, "You handled it better than I would have." "I'm sorry you had to go through that." David gave him a small smile. "Thank you," he said simply. "Sometimes it's better to stay calm and let the truth speak later." The man nodded in agreement. "Well, I hope she learns her lesson." David didn't reply, but inside he knew she would. He didn't need revenge or loud confrontation. He had something stronger. The next day, her actions would face real consequences. He stood up, thanked the barista, and walked toward the parking lot. The evening light cast a warm glow over the street, and the sound of the city surrounded him again. As he reached his car, he paused and looked back at the luxury store one last time. People were still going in and out, unaware that tomorrow everything inside would change. David got into his car, started the engine, and drove away quietly, leaving behind the glittering store and the woman who thought she could judge people by their appearance. He didn't need to say anything more. The wheels were already turning. What Linda had done in arrogance, she would soon regret in realization. And for David, this was just another day, another step toward making things right one store at a time. That night, after leaving the store, David drove home quietly. The city lights passed by his car windows, blurring into streaks of gold and white. He didn't turn on the radio or call anyone. He just drove in silence, letting his thoughts replay the scene from earlier. The looks, the whispers, the words that had cut through the air like tiny knives. It wasn't the first time he had experienced something like that, but each time it happened, it still stung in a way he couldn't fully explain. When he reached his small apartment, he poured himself a glass of water and sat by the desk where his laptop waited. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of the ceiling fan. He opened his notes from earlier, reviewed them, and began typing up his official report. His fingers moved quickly but carefully. He didn't write with anger. Every word he typed was calm, factual, and professional. He described how the staff ignored him, how the manager confronted him, and how she called security even though he never raised his voice or caused any trouble. He added the time, date, and even the names of the employees on duty. which he had quietly noted while inside. When he was done, he reread everything twice. The report was detailed but fair. No emotion, just the truth. That was how he worked. His goal wasn't to punish people. It was to make companies face what they often chose to ignore. Once satisfied, he saved the file and sent it to the corporate office with a short message. Report from today's undercover visit. Downtown luxury branch. Serious behavioral violations found. Recommend immediate review. After pressing send, he leaned back in his chair. Outside, the streetlights flickered softly. Somewhere down the road, someone was playing slow jazz music on a balcony. For a moment, he just listened, letting the sound calm him. He thought about his mother. She used to tell him, "Don't let other people's small hearts make your heart smaller." Those words had carried him through many difficult days. He smiled faintly. She had been right. The next morning, David woke up early. His phone buzzed before breakfast. It was a call from the company's senior compliance director, a woman he had worked with for years. Her voice was calm but serious. "David, I read your report," she said. "It's disappointing, but not surprising. We've had complaints about that store before." David nodded, though she couldn't see him. "I noticed," he replied. The behavior wasn't just careless. It was intentional. There was a short pause. "We'll take it from here," she said. "But I'd like you to join us for the follow-up visit tomorrow morning. I want you there when we address it." "Of course," David said. When the call ended, he closed his eyes for a moment, thinking about how fast things were moving. Usually these kinds of reviews took weeks, but the company wanted action now. That meant they were taking it seriously, as they should. Later that day, David went for a walk in the park near his apartment. He often did that to clear his mind before a big task. The morning air was crisp, and the sound of leaves crunching under his shoes felt grounding. He watched families, joggers, and couples walk past, everyone wrapped up in their own worlds. He thought about the store again. Not about Linda's words, but about the young guard who had escorted him out. The guard's face had looked uncomfortable, almost guilty. Maybe not everyone there agreed with her behavior. Maybe some of them just didn't know what to do. David hoped the visit tomorrow would not just expose what was wrong, but also open some eyes. Sometimes people needed to be reminded that kindness and respect didn't cost a thing. The next morning, David dressed more formally than usual. He wore a clean navy blue suit, polished shoes, and carried a small folder under his arm. When he looked at himself in the mirror, he saw the same calm expression as always. But this time there was something else behind it. Determination. He arrived at the corporate headquarters just before 8. The tall building gleamed in the sunlight. Inside, a small team was already gathered around a table. There were 2 other inspectors, a legal advisor, and the compliance director, the same woman who had called him yesterday. She smiled slightly when she saw him. "David, good to see you," she said. "We're going to handle this professionally. You'll be with us, but let me do most of the talking." "Understood," he replied. They spent the next hour reviewing his report, highlighting the parts that showed clear violations of company policy. The legal advisor made notes about discrimination laws, and the director prepared the documents for the on-site review. By the time they left the building, the team was ready. They drove together to the same luxury store downtown, the same one that had humiliated him just a day earlier. When they arrived, the staff inside didn't recognize the sleek black company car parked outside. It wasn't until the group of executives stepped out, dressed in suits, holding files and wearing company badges, that people began whispering. Linda, who had been arranging a new window display, looked up and froze for a second. Her confident smile faded when she saw who was leading the group. David. He wasn't wearing the plain clothes from yesterday. He looked sharp, composed, and clearly in charge. For a moment, she didn't move. Then she quickly straightened her jacket and walked toward them with an awkward smile. "Good morning," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Welcome to our store. What brings you here today?" The compliance director stepped forward. "We're here for an internal audit and performance review," she said politely. This location was chosen for an unannounced visit. Linda nodded nervously. Of course. Please come in. We take pride in our service here." David stood quietly beside the director, watching the scene. The same salesman who had ignored him yesterday was now standing straight, offering polite greetings. The irony wasn't lost on him. The team began their inspection. They looked through records, asked questions, and observed how staff interacted with customers. As they worked, Linda kept glancing at David, trying to place where she had seen him before. It took her nearly 20 minutes to realize. Her face went pale. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. David noticed and gave a small, polite smile. "Nice to see you again," he said quietly. Her eyes widened. You were here yesterday," she whispered. "Yes," he said simply. "I was." The director noticed the exchange and turned toward Linda. "Is there something you'd like to tell us?" Linda stammered, No, just recognizing a customer from yesterday." The director's expression didn't change. "Interesting," she said calmly. "Mr. David is one of our regional compliance officers. He was here yesterday conducting an undercover evaluation." The words hit like a hammer. The entire staff went silent. You could hear the soft hum of the air conditioner and the ticking of a clock on the wall. Linda's face turned red. I didn't realize," David interrupted gently. "That's the point. You weren't supposed to realize." The director laid the report on the counter. "We've reviewed the footage, the notes, and multiple customer complaints. It's clear there's been repeated discrimination and unprofessional behavior at this location." Linda tried to speak, but her voice broke. I was only trying to protect the store's image. I thought." The director raised a hand to stop her. "The company's image is not built by exclusion. It's built by integrity." David didn't gloat or look satisfied. He just stood silently, letting the moment speak for itself. He had no desire to embarrass anyone, but sometimes the truth itself was enough to teach a lesson. As the review continued, other staff members began to share their own stories. Some admitted they had seen unfair behavior but were too afraid to speak up. The director listened carefully, taking notes. After about an hour, the decision was clear. The director called Linda aside. Their conversation was brief but firm. By the time they were done, Linda looked like someone who had finally understood what her actions had cost her. Not just her position, but her reputation. When the team left the store, the air outside felt lighter somehow. The tension had broken. David walked a few steps ahead, stopping to look at the store from across the street again. It looked the same as yesterday. Shiny glass, golden lights, but everything inside had changed. The director joined him, glancing at the building. "You handled that well," she said softly. David smiled faintly. "I didn't have to do much," he replied. "The truth handled it for me." They stood there for a moment, both quiet. Then she said, It's not just about punishing people. It's about changing the culture." "You've done that today," David nodded. "That's the goal." As the team drove away, David looked out the window one last time. He didn't feel anger or triumph, just peace, because he knew what would come next. Tomorrow, the store would open its doors again. Customers would walk in like always. But the people inside would remember what happened. And maybe, just maybe, they'd treat everyone a little differently from now on. After the review, the store felt completely different. The usual air of pride and luxury had been replaced with silence. The employees spoke softly to one another, uncertain of what the next day would bring. The woman who had once commanded the room with confidence was now gone. Her absence left a strange emptiness that everyone could feel. David didn't return to the office right away. Instead, he decided to visit the company headquarters later in the afternoon. He wanted to observe from a distance first, to see what kind of atmosphere the store carried now that the truth was out. He walked past the same shiny glass windows that had once reflected his quiet humiliation. The same perfume scent drifted from the entrance, but this time the energy inside was different. The staff moved carefully, greeting each person who entered with warm smiles. They were trying, that much was clear. From across the street, David watched as a young woman walked into the store. She wore simple clothes, nothing fancy. A few days ago, someone like her might have been ignored or treated like she didn't belong. But this time, the moment she stepped inside, a salesman walked up to her and asked if she needed help. David noticed the difference and smiled quietly to himself. Change wasn't always loud. Sometimes it began in small, simple ways. After observing for a while, he turned and walked toward the corner cafe where he had sat before. The same barista was behind the counter, and she recognized him instantly. "Back again?" she asked with a friendly grin. He nodded. "Yes, seems like I can't stay away from this place." She laughed and handed him his usual black coffee. You look happier today, she said. David took a sip before answering. Maybe because I saw something good happen. Sometimes things actually turn out the way they should. The barista didn't know what he meant, but she smiled anyway. That's rare. Good for you. David sat by the window again, looking at the store from a distance. He thought about how quickly things could change. One small action, one moment of courage, one person deciding to do what's right. He had seen people lose their jobs, yes, but he had also seen others grow, learn, and change after being given a second chance. As the afternoon sun warmed the cafe windows, his phone buzzed. It was a message from the company director. Thank you for your professionalism yesterday. The case is officially closed. The store will undergo staff training starting next week. We'd like you to supervise the first session. David read the message twice and smiled. He had led many such sessions before, but this one felt different. This one was personal. The next week arrived quickly. The store reopened with a new manager, a young man who had worked in the company for years and was known for his patience and fairness. David met him early that morning before the staff arrived. The man greeted him warmly, shaking his hand firmly. I heard what happened, he said. It's not going to happen again, not under my watch. David believed him. That's good to hear, he replied. What matters most now is rebuilding trust, not just with customers, but among your team too. When the employees arrived, they looked nervous at first. Some avoided eye contact, unsure how David would see them after everything that had happened. But instead of lecturing them, he began the session by sharing a simple story. I once worked as a salesman, he began. A young boy came in with his father to buy a suit for graduation. They didn't look wealthy, and some of my coworkers ignored them. But I helped them. The father bought the most expensive suit we had that day, not because of the brand, but because someone treated him with respect. That moment stayed with me. The room grew quiet. Everyone listened closely. Every person who walks through those doors, David continued, is more than what you see. You don't know their story. You don't know their struggles. So treat them like they matter, and because they do. His voice was calm but carried weight. He could see the staff shifting in their seats, taking in his words. There was no anger in his tone, just truth. After the session, several employees came to speak with him privately. One of them, the same young security guard who had been there the day of the incident, looked especially uneasy. Sir, the guard said, I'm sorry for what happened that day. I wanted to stop it, but I didn't know how. I just followed orders. David looked at him and nodded. I understand. It's not easy to stand up in the moment. But now you know. Next time, don't stay silent when something feels wrong. Silence can make you part of the problem. The guard nodded, his eyes full of regret but also determination. I won't forget that, he said quietly. By the end of the day, the mood in the store had changed completely. People were talking, smiling, working together. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. David felt proud, not because someone had been punished, but because something had shifted for the better. Later, he sat with the new manager in the office. The man leaned back in his chair and said, You know, the old manager used to say she was protecting the brand. But what she really did was hurt it. David nodded. The brand isn't the building or the logo. It's the people. Every smile, every word, every act of kindness, and that's what makes people come back. The manager smiled thoughtfully. You're right. I'll make sure they remember that. As David left the store that evening, the sky had turned golden. He walked slowly, letting the moment sink in. The world around him buzzed with life. Cars passing by, people laughing, music from a nearby cafe. But in his heart, there was peace. When he got home, he sat on the balcony with a cup of tea. He opened his laptop and began writing another report. This time, not about violations or complaints, but about progress. He described how the new manager was taking responsibility, how the staff were learning, and how the atmosphere had already improved. He ended the report with one line. Real change starts when respect replaces pride. He sent it to the corporate office and closed his laptop. Then he leaned back and looked at the night sky. A few days later, he received a call from the company's CEO. It wasn't common for him to speak directly with David, but this case had reached his desk. I read your reports, the CEO said. You handled everything perfectly. We're planning to use your story in our upcoming diversity training program. David chuckled softly. If it helps others learn, I'm glad. It will. the CEO said. Sometimes the best lessons come from real experiences, not from presentations. After the call ended, David sat quietly for a long moment. He thought about how strange life could be, how a simple visit to a store had turned into something much bigger. He hadn't planned to make a statement or be anyone's example. He had just wanted fairness. But maybe sometimes fairness itself was the most powerful lesson of all. That weekend, David decided to stop by the store again, just as a customer this time. He didn't tell anyone he was coming. He wore casual clothes the same way he had during his first visit. When he walked in, the staff greeted him warmly. "Good afternoon, sir. Can we help you find something today?" one of them asked with a genuine smile. David smiled back. "Just looking around, thank you." He walked past the same glass case that had started it all. The luxury watch was still there, shining under the lights. He asked to see it, and without hesitation, the salesman carefully took it out and placed it in his hands. "Beautiful piece, isn't it?" the man said. David nodded, turning it gently. "Yes," he said softly. "It really is." He looked around at the store, the polite staff, the calm energy, the sense of respect in the air, and felt a quiet satisfaction. Things had changed, not just for him, but for everyone who would walk through those doors from now on. When he handed the watch back, the salesman said, "Take your time, sir. We're here if you need anything." David smiled and replied, "You already did enough." As he stepped outside, the sun hit his face, warm and bright. He took a deep breath and walked down the street, blending in with the crowd. He didn't need anyone to know who he was or what he had done. The world didn't need heroes who shouted their deeds. It needed people who quietly made things better. And that's exactly what he had done. The morning sun filtered through the city streets, casting long, golden lines across the pavement. David walked calmly toward the luxury store, carrying a small notebook in one hand and a quiet sense of purpose in his step. The street was already bustling with shoppers and commuters, but today, something felt different. There was a tension in the air, almost invisible but enough to notice if you were paying attention. Inside the store, employees had gathered in a small meeting area. The new manager stood at the front, trying to calm a few nerves. "Remember," he said gently, "we are here to serve every customer with respect. No exceptions. Treat every person the way you'd want to be treated." David entered quietly, letting the room settle before speaking. He didn't raise his voice or demand attention. Instead, he let his presence be felt by simply standing there. The employees recognized him instantly. The man who had been the reason for the whirlwind of change was back, not to scold but to guide. He opened his notebook and began slowly. "Yesterday I saw a big difference here. The energy felt calmer, more respectful, and that matters. But today is about moving forward, not looking back." Heads nodded quietly. The staff listened intently. They had all felt the weight of the previous week's events, and David's calm voice carried authority without anger. He turned to the new manager. "This is your team now. Your responsibility is to ensure that every person who walks in feels welcome, no matter who they are or where they come from. Not just because it's policy, but because it's the right thing to do." The manager nodded, his jaw tight but determined. "Understood," he said firmly. David walked among the staff, stopping briefly to make eye contact with each person. He spoke softly but directly. "You all have the power to make a difference in someone's day. A simple smile, a polite question, even just listening carefully can change how a person experiences this store. Don't underestimate that." He paused and looked at one of the younger employees who had seemed hesitant since the first incident. "I know it's not always easy," he said gently. "Sometimes people make assumptions. Sometimes fear or pride gets in the way. But every moment is a chance to do better." The young employee nodded, taking a deep breath. "I'll try," she said quietly. David smiled faintly. "Trying is the first step. Acting is the next." After the staff session, David walked to the display area, where the luxury items were arranged with care. The golden lights reflected off the glass cases, making the watches and jewelry shine brilliantly. It could have been an intimidating sight for any visitor, but today it was different. The energy in the room was softer, more respectful. Employees approached customers with genuine attentiveness, not rehearsed gestures. David observed quietly as a family walked in. A mother, father, and 2 children. They looked nervous, unsure if they were welcome. In the past, someone like them might have been overlooked. But today, the staff approached them immediately, offering help and guidance without judgment. He smiled quietly to himself. This was the kind of change that mattered. Small gestures, simple actions, but enough to alter someone's experience completely. Later, David met with the new manager privately in his office. The man leaned back in his chair, looking at the reports David had left behind. "I didn't realize how serious things were until you explained it all," he said. "I thought I understood, but seeing it play out, it's different. I want to make sure this store never goes back to that environment." David nodded. "That's good. Awareness is one thing. Commitment is another. You need to show it every day, not just during inspections." The manager nodded slowly. "I will. We'll implement training sessions, weekly check-ins, and anonymous feedback so everyone can speak up if they see something wrong." "That's a strong start," David said. "And don't forget to celebrate the improvements too. Positive reinforcement encourages better behavior just as much as correction does." By mid-afternoon, a few curious customers began to arrive. Some had heard about the changes from friends or online posts. They watched quietly, unsure if the staff had truly changed. David noticed how carefully employees greeted each person, how they asked questions politely, and how they avoided assumptions based on appearance. A man and woman entered, looking around hesitantly. One of the staff members approached them with a warm smile. "Good afternoon. Can I help you find something today?" she asked politely. The couple looked surprised but smiled back. "Yes, we're just looking," the man said. David watched silently as the staff guided them through the store, offering insights about the products without pressuring them to buy anything. There was a calm professionalism that hadn't existed before. He thought back to the first time he had been kicked out. The memory of Linda's harsh words still lingered, but it no longer carried pain. It had transformed into motivation. This was the real reward, seeing change happen not because of punishment, but because people chose to act differently. As the day went on, David moved quietly through the store, observing interactions and making mental notes. He didn't need to intervene. The staff had already embraced the lesson. Still, he made small gestures, a nod of approval here, a quiet word of encouragement there. Every bit mattered. When the afternoon slowed, he called the staff together once more. "I want you all to remember something," he said softly. "It's easy to treat people well when everything is calm. The real test is when things get busy or stressful. That's when your choices matter the most." He paused, letting the words sink in. Treating everyone with respect isn't just about company policy or rules. It's about being human. Everyone deserves dignity. Every person who walks through that door matters. The employees listened in silence. Some nodded, others just stared quietly, but everyone understood. This wasn't a lecture. It was a reminder, a truth they couldn't ignore. Afterward, David walked to the back room where the new manager was organizing paperwork. "I want to leave this in your hands," he said. "Make sure these lessons continue. Don't let old habits return. You have the chance to make this store a model for the entire company." The manager looked determined. "I will. Thank you for guiding us. We couldn't have done this without your help." David smiled faintly. "You did the work. I just pointed the way." As the day ended and the last customers left, David stepped outside. The evening air was cool and refreshing. He looked back at the store, now quiet and orderly, and felt a quiet satisfaction. This wasn't about revenge or punishment. It was about improvement, about fairness, about ensuring that everyone who walked through those doors in the future would feel respected. He walked to his car slowly, reflecting on the events. The city was alive around him. Honking cars, people laughing, vendors calling out their goods. Life went on, but inside the store, a transformation had quietly taken place. Later that night, David sat on his balcony with a notebook, writing down the day's observations. He detailed the changes, the positive interactions, and the growth he had seen. He also wrote suggestions for continued improvement, weekly staff meetings, diversity workshops, and anonymous feedback channels. He sent the notes to the corporate office, knowing that the process of change wasn't over. Real change required patience, persistence, and consistent action. After finishing, he leaned back and looked at the stars. There was a sense of peace in the air. The world could be unfair and people could act harshly, but there was always a chance to make things right. Sometimes the quiet acts of courage and guidance had the power to change more than anger ever could. For David, this was just one of many stores. He knew there would be more places where respect had to be reminded, where kindness had to be chosen over pride. But seeing this store transform in just a few days gave him hope. It showed that even small, consistent actions could make a real difference. Before heading inside, he took one last look at the city streets, the glowing windows, and the bustling crowd. Somewhere in the crowd, ordinary people were moving through their days unaware of the lessons learned behind those luxury glass walls. And that was exactly how it should be. Change didn't need to be publicized to matter. David walked inside his apartment and closed the door quietly. He didn't feel the need to celebrate or announce what had been accomplished. The work had been done, the lesson had been taught, and the seeds of lasting change had been planted. And deep down, he knew that tomorrow the store would open its doors again, and the people inside would treat every customer with the respect and dignity they deserved. The morning sun broke gently over the city, casting soft light across the streets. David walked through the neighborhood, feeling the cool breeze on his face. Today felt different, not because of the weather, but because of the quiet satisfaction in his heart. He had seen change happen, and he knew that some things could never go back to the way they were. As he approached the luxury store, he noticed people entering with confidence and curiosity. The staff greeted them warmly, guiding them through displays and helping them with polite patience. David slowed his pace, watching for a few moments from a distance. The energy inside was completely transformed. Gone were the whispers, the judgmental glances, and the cold avoidance he had encountered during his first visit. A young couple walked in, holding hands and looking slightly nervous. The moment they stepped through the doors, a salesperson approached them with a genuine smile. "Good morning, welcome. How can we assist you today?" she asked. The couple exchanged surprised looks, then smiled back. "Thank you," the man said. "We're just browsing." David nodded quietly to himself. This was exactly the kind of change he had hoped for. It wasn't about punishment or public shaming. It was about creating an environment where every customer felt respected, safe, and valued. Later that day, David met with the new manager in a quiet corner of the store. The man had grown more confident over the past week, and it showed in his posture and voice. "I can't believe how different things feel now," he said. "It's like the entire store has a new energy," David smiled. "That's because it does. Change isn't instant, but it starts with small steps. Every greeting, every polite question, every moment of respect adds up." The manager nodded. "We've even had a few customers comment on the difference. Some came in because they had heard about the changes, and they wanted to see for themselves. They're impressed." "That's a good sign," David said. "It shows that people notice kindness and fairness. That's how a positive reputation grows, not by exclusion but by inclusion." During the afternoon, a few staff members approached David to talk privately. One of them was the young security guard who had escorted him out on his first visit. He looked nervous but determined. "Sir," he began, "I wanted to thank you for showing us how things should be. I realize now that I could have handled things differently yesterday." "I won't make that mistake again," David nodded, his expression calm. "That's all anyone can do. Learn from the past and do better next time. You have the chance to make a real difference here every day. Take it." The guard's shoulders relaxed and he nodded. "I will. Thank you." Another employee, a young woman who had been hesitant during the first week, approached him next. "I was afraid to speak up before," she admitted. "But now I feel like I can. I want to help make this a place where everyone is treated fairly." David smiled gently. "That's the spirit. Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's the quiet voice at the end of the day that says, 'I will try again tomorrow.' Keep that voice alive." By the evening, the store was closing. David walked through one last time, observing the interactions between staff and the remaining customers. Each exchange felt natural and respectful. No one was pretending. No one was acting out of fear. The store had transformed into a place where fairness and dignity mattered more than wealth or appearances. He stepped outside and took a deep breath. The air was warm with the last rays of the sun. He could see families walking down the street, friends laughing as they passed by, and shopkeepers closing their doors for the day. Life went on as it always did, but for this store, and for the people inside it, something fundamental had shifted. David returned to his apartment and opened his laptop. He began writing a final report for the corporate office. This time it wasn't about violations or complaints. It was about progress, lessons learned, and the power of small, consistent actions. He wrote about how respect and kindness could transform an environment more effectively than any policy or rule. He detailed the improvements in staff behavior, the changes in customer interactions, and the new culture being fostered by the management team. He ended the report with one line: "True luxury is not in the price of the items, but in the dignity and respect offered to every person who walks through these doors." After sending the report, David leaned back in his chair. He didn't feel the need to celebrate or broadcast his work. The real reward was the knowledge that a place that had once excluded and humiliated people was now welcoming and fair. A few days later, the story began to spread quietly online. Someone had shared their experience at the store, praising the employees for their kindness and the management for implementing real change. Comments poured in from people who had visited and noticed the difference. Many were moved by the story of transformation, not realizing that the man behind it all had been watching quietly from the sidelines. David smiled as he read the posts. Change didn't need to be loud to be meaningful. Sometimes the most powerful lessons happened quietly, through action rather than words. One afternoon, he decided to visit the store again, this time completely incognito. He wore casual clothes, no jacket, no tie, blending in with the other customers. The staff greeted him politely as they did with everyone else. He walked through the displays, admired the craftsmanship of the watches and jewelry, and even asked a few questions. Every interaction was smooth, natural, and respectful. As he left, a young family approached him. The mother smiled and said, "Excuse me, sir, but did you notice the difference here? Everyone has been so kind, it feels different in a good way." David returned their smile. "It is different," he said softly. "And it's wonderful to see." Walking away from the store, he realized how far things had come. What had begun as a painful experience for him had become a catalyst for real, meaningful change. The employees had learned, the customers had noticed, and the company had taken responsibility. That evening, David sat on his balcony with a cup of tea looking at the city lights. He thought about how easily people could judge one another, how small actions could hurt or uplift, and how important it was to always choose respect. The lesson was simple, yet powerful. Fairness and kindness were stronger than pride and prejudice. He reflected on the journey, the humiliation, the reports, the corporate meetings, the training sessions, and the transformations. Every step had mattered. Every quiet choice had made a difference. And most importantly, the people inside the store had chosen to embrace change rather than resist it. David knew there would be more stores, more situations, more people who needed guidance and fairness. This was just one story, one example, but it was proof that positive change was possible, that even in a world where judgment and prejudice could appear in the most polished places, courage, patience, and quiet determination could make a lasting impact. As the night deepened, the city quieted down. David finished his tea and closed his notebook. He didn't need to be recognized or praised. He had seen the results of his actions, and that was enough. He understood that the true measure of success was not in accolades or attention, but in the quiet transformations that happened because someone chose to do the right thing. Before going to bed, he glanced once more at the city skyline, glittering with lights. Somewhere people were walking home, carrying the lessons of the day in their own way. Somewhere, someone would smile because a simple interaction had been handled with care and respect. And somewhere, a young employee in that store would remember the quiet words of encouragement, the lessons about dignity, and the importance of treating every person as a human being first. David turned off the lights and lay down. He felt calm, fulfilled, and quietly hopeful. The story of one luxury store, one manager, and one man who refused to accept unfair treatment was complete, but its impact would ripple far beyond that single location. In a world where cruelty and prejudice often went unnoticed, this small story was a reminder that fairness, respect, and kindness could win, if only people chose to act on them. And for David, that choice had made all the difference. The city slept peacefully outside his window, unaware of the quiet triumph that had taken place within its shiny buildings. But the world didn't need to know. Change, after all, didn't require an audience. It only required courage, patience, and the willingness to do what was right. No matter how small the first step seemed, And with that thought, David closed his eyes, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new chances to make a difference, quietly, patiently, and with unwavering respect for every human being he encountered.